So my dreams were bigger than the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, where I grew up. I dreamed of the big city cosmopolitan life, art, cafes, nightclubs, and interesting conversation with people from around the world. In the spring of 1998, when I was 20 years old, I took my first international flight by myself, no parents, and I was on my way to Paris. I could feel myself growing older and more sophisticated with every mile that passed. Yes, flight attendant, I would like some more red wine from that tiny bottle. Yes, flight attendant, I did spend a lot of time thinking about what to wear on this overnight flight. Yes, flight attendant, I am young and beautiful and solo and adventurous and on my way to Paris. What I didn't tell the flight attendant or my parents or many of my friends was that I was on my way to Paris to meet a man for the first time that I had befriended on a little thing called the internet. His name was Nayan, and he was British Indian, and I had met him a couple of years previous in a chat room early on in my freshman year of college. The first time we ever chatted, he told me that he was 23, and that he was lived in London, and that he was a broker. I didn't know what a broker was, but that sounded hot. And there was just something about the way that we chatted that I just instinctively felt like he was telling me the truth, and we exchanged email addresses. We started just corresponding. And at first, the emails were infrequent and covered the basic things like our families and our interests. But over time, over the course of 2 years, our emails became daily. And I would wake up so excited every morning to see what he had written to me while I was sleeping. He was like my morning cup of coffee. I gobbled up his stories of his big city life in London. Radha, he would write, we had this mad night. We were out clubbing all night. Radha, we were out drinking, and we ended up at this crazy strip club. It was this exotic, swanky life. And then eventually he started flirting with me too. Radha, I think about all the places I would take you if you were here in London with me. But these were the days before digital cameras or Skype. And so we never talked about speaking on the phone or exchanging photos. We just corresponded. And I had this massive crush on this 20-something-year-old broker on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, my sophomore year ended, and I decided to go to Paris to visit a friend of mine who was studying abroad there. And Nayan decided to go from London to Paris to meet me. On that flight over to Paris, I fantasized about what my new life in London was going to look like after the inevitable romance that Nayan and I were going to have in Paris. Yes, Nayan, I do think it would make a lot of sense for me to move to London after college. Yes, Nayan, I do think I will need to get a whole new wardrobe to live in London. Yes, Nayan, you are right. We will have to come up with a new How We Met story. Well, I arrived in Paris, and the next morning, I went to the Gare du Nord train station to pick up Nayan. And as the crowd parted, I knew that was him. He wore this black ribbed turtleneck sweater and khaki cargo pants. He was an Indian Abercrombie & Fitch model. Vijay loves that line. He walked up to me, and he opened up his mouth, and he said to me, Radha, it is such a pleasure to finally meet you. Hot, 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 hot. And it was easy to talk and to be together, and we weren't strangers. And we had this amazing day in Paris, and then we hit the town that night, this beautiful spring May night in Paris. And we went to bars, and we went to restaurants, and we held hands. And all of my dreams were coming true. Around 1 in the morning, we ended up at a small round table in the dark corner of a bar. And because I believed very strongly that a sophisticated woman could make the first move, I decided that I needed to kiss him. But I had to sober up first. So I waited until I thought the moment was right. And I sat up in my chair, And I leaned seductively forward towards him. And I took his lapels in my hand, and I drew him towards me. And at the exact moment that I thought our lips would meet, I felt the cheek. I let the lapels go, and I sank back into my chair with bewilderment, SOS signals going off in my brain. And to make matters worse, he looked at me and opened his mouth in that beautiful British accent. He said to me, "Radha, you are so special to me. I think of you just like a sister." So I got back on my flight to go home, and I was a little embarrassed and a bit squashed, but still fantasizing about Nyan. It's true, you should read my journals. And you know, I realize now, kind of looking back, that it really had nothing to do with the boy or with London. It actually had to do with adventure and creating something new for myself. And that solo flight to Paris and that adventure in that beautiful city only made my desire for the international life grow bigger and bigger. And I have to say it, my boyfriend now is British, and he lives in Australia, and he doesn't think of me like a sister.